Right, now that's where I stopped the song. Behind the shelter in the middle of the roundabout. Because those of you who have a view in front of us and slightly to the right, lo and behold, a shelter in the middle of the roundabout. Further to the right is the TSB Bank, where apparently the banker never wore a map. This is the place Paul wrote about. He was feeling a little bit nostalgic about Liverpool, and he just wrote about the places he knew and loved, where his mum would do his shopping. He'd travel through this way, probably wait for a bus at the shelter in the middle of the roundabout, almost every day, probably where he'd have his hair cut as well, so if Kevin moves forward slightly... Oh look, there's a barber shop, Tony Slavin's, with a photograph of the Beatles in the window, and the Penny Lane Road sign. Sunday today, so obviously the barber's not there, but when he is, he usually comes out and blows me big kisses. He's lovely. This used to be an Italian barber's in the days of the Beatles, known as Mr. Bialetti's. Okay, we want the after the foot, the left hand. And that is possibly where Paul McCartney would have his hair cut. But that is what Paul wrote about. Ordinary place, but it was special to Paul, and it's not ordinary anymore. It used to be ordinary before Paul wrote the song. Now, if we were to travel forward, we're going to take a left turn, but the next road over to the right, the next little road there, that is Newcastle Road. John Lennon lived in number 5 Newcastle Road, number 9 Newcastle Road, until he was 5 years old. This is where he lived with his mum and his grandfather, because Fred, just excuse me for a sec.
He was only just come, there's 3 lots here, Kevin.
Yeah, I'll tell him.
I just want everyone to come round here for a while, you know.
Well, I'll tell the story now and then just walk it down.
Hey, the trees are dodgy in a park, aren't they, Kevin, eh?
No, you keep in the middle.
I know from experience. Yes, four.
He wanted to formally introduce them to his mum, Queenie. So he brought them along for afternoon tea, which wasn't quite their thing, you know. I don't think they'd been to many afternoon tea parties in their lives. Lennon's life would have revolved around as a little boy. He wasn't a city boy, John Lennon, he was a little village kid. This is Woolton. So here's your church. This is the church which John would have attended. He was actually thrown out of the choir. But on the opposite side, right next to the church, it's further over, there's a field. And on the 6th of July 1957, the vicar here organised a summer fair for the people of the parish. And he wanted to attract some teenagers to his flock here, so he booked a band to play. That band were called the Quarrymen. Once again, John Lennon's the only one we'd know. But a younger boy had come along to watch him. If we can pause slightly here, because the field is just over to the left, if we were to take this little path, that would take us onto the field where the Quarrymen played. So this younger boy came along to watch, and after the band had played, he went across to the youth club, which is the opposite side of the road from the church. The younger lad was called Whitney Willie once. You can take your photographs. And you can play there something solid for that. Stand in, please, this way, stand in. Lennon lived. So we're going to move forward, and then just after the bus stop, it's number 251 Menlove Avenue, which is called Mendips.
Yesterday, had a group playing on top of the, you know, the Penny Lane, you know, on top of the thinking, yeah? And it's taxi, isn't it?
Right, we can obviously tell which house it is. Yeah, it's the one by the taxi. But as I say, we won't be getting out and taking photographs here, so you'll have to take them from the coach, I'm afraid. Let's hope this taxi moves on so we can move forward and get a better view. Well, this is the home that John Lennon lived in from the age of 5. He lived with his mum until he was 5 years old, and then she found herself with another man, and his name was John or Bobby Dykins. He was known by 2 names. And they moved into a flat, a 1-bedroom flat, and there wasn't really room for John. Now the Stanley sisters, there were 5 of them, and they were very, very close. They all got on very well together, and the children would stay at all their different aunts' homes anyway. And so Mimi said, well, John can come and live with me. So John came to live in this lovely little house in this suburb called Woolton. Just above the doorway was his bedroom, and in that little doorway there, that is where John Lennon used to have to practice his guitar, because Aunt Mimi hated the sound of him playing. She said to him words that she lived to regret, really. She said, now listen here, John, the guitar's all very well, but you'll never make a living out of it. And of course John made a brilliant living out of the guitar, and after he did, he bought his Aunt Mimi a bungalow, a lovely little house down in Poole in Dorset, where she'd spent many holidays, to get away from Beatles fans, really. I think Kevin's trying to frighten this taxi into moving and he's not going. And when she moved into this house, a total surprise to her, she was so happy about it. She saw that there was a little carved plaque above the fireplace. She walked up to this and took a read of it, and it said, the guitar's all very well, John, but you'll never make a living out of it. So John got his own back on his hands. She was full of these little sayings. John was a real Elvis fan when he was a teenager. And she'd say to him, now listen, John, Elvis Presley's all very well, but I don't want him for breakfast, dinner and tea. So she'd stop him playing his Elvis records. So if you've all taken a quick snap of John's home, we can move on. By her employers. So when they moved here, Paul was 12 years old, and Mary decided, that's it, I'm not going to move again, this is the place I'm going to stay in. And so she was here for 2 years, but tragically then she died. She had cancer, and she died when Paul McCartney was 14 years old. So the family continued to live here. James McCartney, his father, was a cotton merchant, so he had the tough job of bringing up 2 teenage sons on his own and going out to work to earn a living for them. So when he did go off to work, the lads would have the mates back at the house here. You know, it was a safe house, no parents around. And the mates in those days would probably be John Lennon, big boy from Art College, George Harrison, little lad from school, and possibly Stuart Sutcliffe, maybe Pete Best in those days, not Ringo yet. So they'd all come back and practice playing here in the house. Now Beatlemania once again became too much for the family. Paul moved down to London, and then he bought his dad and his brother a home on the opposite side of the River Mersey. So if you take your ferry across the Mersey, you're on the Wirral. He still owns that home today. It's called Rembrandt, and it's in Baskerville Road in Heswell. If anybody's got a car and wants to take a trip over, he won't be there today. And so they moved away, and the lady that was given the house after them, remember these were rented properties, she moved in and she saw that one of the bedroom doors was covered in graffiti, which she thought, oh, I'm not having that. That was a tin of paint, painted over this graffiti, and then she realised it wasn't just any old scribble on this door, it was the lyrics to early Beatles songs which Paul McCartney had scribbled on the back of his bedroom door when he couldn't find a piece of paper, and she painted over them. Wow. So this home now belongs to the National Trust. They are the people who look after the houses, the castles, the stately homes, the big palaces, all the grand homes of Britain. The National Trust look after them. This is the only council house that belongs to them. Paul McCartney's old house. So back on board. Becca, two-storey bus like this one to go into school every day. Sitting upstairs would quite often be a younger boy in the same school whose name was George Harrison. So the two of them would travel to school together. In fact, the man driving the bus could quite possibly be Mr. Harold Harrison, who was George Harrison's father. He was a bus driver in the early days. Did you know him, Kevin?
No,
No, you didn't work with him, did you know? So he was a bus driver. So they travel into school every day, and the two of them became quite good friends, even though George was a little bit younger than Paul. But I think the main thing that held them together was their love of guitar. So, to give me mate Ed a ring. Oh, a wave even, as we go past. Okay, so the two would sit on top of the bus going into Liverpool Institute. Quite a long journey really, which we're going to take now. And they would discuss their guitars, they would discuss the latest rock and roll songs which were coming across the Atlantic. Liverpool was in a very fortunate position because being the major port for the transatlantic goods. Right is the TSB Bank, where the banker never wore a Mac. The little shop next door to that, incidentally, on the left-hand side of it, it's now a Bernardo's charity shop. That was the photography studios. The man's name was Albert Marion, and he took the first publicity shots of the Beatles. You can see your barber shop and the shelter in the middle of the roundabout, which is now Sergeant Pepper's Bistro. Over to the left is a church. That is St Barnabas. They weren't quite as fussy about the choir boys here at St Barnabas because Paul Now over to the right, beyond this gentleman on the column, who is the Duke of Wellington, you can see the Walker Art Gallery. This is the building here with the columns. I mean, it's quite well signposted for you. There is a painting belonging to Stuart Sutcliffe in the gallery. It's Handberg No. 2, and there have been various exhibitions of Stuart's paintings and the art of the Beatles in Liverpool. But Stuart Sutcliffe entered a competition. It's the John Moores exhibition, which goes on every 2 years. There was one last year, so we've got another year to wait. And buildings in Liverpool. Now, Alan Williams thought himself a bit of an entrepreneur in his day. He decided to organise a massive arts ball here at St George's Hall. He wanted to rival the famous arts ball which went on down in Chelsea in London. So all the art students would make big carnival floats which would be decorated, and then they'd be destroyed at the end of the thing as part of the fun, I suppose. There's a beautiful Minton tiled floor in St George's Hall which is priceless, and all of the students started throwing flower bombs with water, and the fire extinguishers were squirted all over them. He all but destroyed this priceless little Minton tiled floor, and so the whole thing was the first and last arts ball in Liverpool. But, you know, I mean, it's totally important now. The papers themselves sell for a fortune, some of them, some particular issues do. But when they started to go nationwide, they moved to different offices. Brian Epstein got involved. He put a lot of input in, which Bill Harry didn't appreciate. And Bill, Harry and Brian Epstein more or less fell out over this, and the paper ended up, it ended up as a kind of watered down version of Mersey Beat with information about bands from all over the place, and then it kind of ground to a halt. But it started off, you know, it chronicled the rise of the Beatles thanks to Bill Harry. Over to the right, Rice Street, halfway along Ye Crack. Some of you will have seen this before. That's a great little pub actually, if you get the chance to go inside. Full of students, plenty of students in this area. But that was the place that John Lennon and Stuart Sutcliffe would go to when they should have been at the Art College. There was one particular tutor, Mr. Arthur Ballard, and he was very forward thinking, and he used to take some of his lessons here actually in Ye Crack. The stories about John Lennon actually swimming in pools of beer on the floor here, and there was a famous film star, so famous that I can never ever remember his name. What was his name, Phil? Can you remember? There's a film called Genevieve.
John Gregson.
What was his name?
John Gregson.
John Gregson. I can never remember him. And John Gregson was the star of this film Genevieve. And one day he pulled up outside Ye Crack, and John Lennon thought, wow, a film star, let's go and get his autograph. But you know, he didn't stand on ceremony, or John didn't get a pen and paper. He found an old boot lying in the gutter and ran up to John Gregson, this big famous film star, with this old boot and asked him to autograph it. That was our John for you, though, wasn't it? Now in front of us, and over to the right, is the Art College. The Art College is the one obviously attended by John Lennon, Stuart Sutcliffe and Bill Harry and Cynthia. So quite a few of them went here. Stuart Sutcliffe was a very talented artist, extremely talented. As Astrid said yesterday, if he'd have lived, I mean, we would have heard an awful lot more about his art because he was talented. John Lennon was talented, but hated any kinds of schooling, so he didn't really, the Art College didn't bring out his full potential. As I say, Stuart Sutcliffe won this money from the John Moores exhibition. Now he could have bought all kinds of artists' equipment with it, he could have even paid the back rent on his flat, but no, he bought this guitar and joined the Quarrymen. Rod Murray wanted to join the Quarrymen, he was desperate to join the Quarrymen, and so he started to make himself a bass guitar. So after his days in the Art College, he'd come home and he'd been trying to put this guitar together from scratch. You know, pretty good job, I'm sure he must have done a bit. So he was every night trying to make this guitar, and as soon as he'd made it, he could join the Quarrymen. As I say, one of the criteria for joining the Quarrymen in those days was that you had an instrument. Didn't matter if you could play it or not, as long as you had one, you looked good on stage, then fair enough. And so, Rod Murray wanted to join, started to make this guitar. In the meanwhile, Stuart Sutcliffe won this art competition, won £65 and bought a guitar. Pretty good one as well, half the President bass. And so Stuart Sutcliffe pipped him to the post, and Stuart actually joined the Quarrymen, and Rod Murray still got this half-made guitar. Throwing his hat in the lake, that's the lake. Now over to the right is the Blenheim Hotel, and this is a place where the Sutcliffe family, Millie Sutcliffe lived at the Blenheim Hotel. Not the whole place, she just kept the room before it was turned into a hotel, and this is where Stuart would actually visit. I think this is the place they were living when they found out about Stuart's death over in Hamburg. Can you just look for, or do you want me to go into any detail about things? Right, I won't. I'm sick of the sight of it myself as well by now. Actually, you've not seen it before, have you, Phil? Actually, a couple of days ago, I wasn't on the tour, but one afternoon, the Mock Tops, one of the Beatles lookalike bands, actually played on top of Sgt. Pepper's Bistro here, a la Let It Be. It was good. It was one of, I think Eddie was on, wasn't he? Eddie the Walrus. Who was on that day? Sorry, father. And surrounding houses like this, which is one of the best ones in Liverpool. Brian's bedroom was upstairs and over to the right. And that was where Brian used to be. He horrified his parents when he asked them to paint it purple one day. They were absolutely horrified by this. But this is where Brian Epstein grew up. He had his own nanny. He grew with his brother Clive. Ken Brown.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, it was Ken Brown. He's getting really famous now, so he can't The Casbar's amazing. I mean, they're not advertised very well, but if you're British and you can get back to Liverpool anytime, Pete Best plays the Casbar quite often.
Is it still open?
It's still open.
Hotel. In fact, we do a shot of the hotel.
You look at these things here, look.
Huh?
You stand here, you look at all these trees and photos. You'll never be a director, man. You know? I was in the Merseyside tourist office there, you know, in one of those shopping centres.
Oh yeah, visitor centre.
Apparently you can book a trip in here, you know, it's £7.50. It goes every day, you know.
Yeah.
So I'll get to see my neighbours. Must be the thing.
We haven't got the plastic figures. I think they were sold off somewhere else in the city. They are still in the city, but many years ago. So nobody actually comes in this way. Hopefully we'll be open when we've got a box office fully working. And the top lighting would have been useful because you obviously need to do your drawings as well, and that those days was a camera. I think that is not that. It became the Liverpool Institute for Boys in approximately 18. This is what we call the atrium.
Get some grease.
You can hit it if you like. You just hit it quietly, a little things, and then you can. So you can
Right.
Reproduction of to its sketchbooks.
So let's have it. I didn't actually tell him to burn his guitar. It was the night before he was leaving England to go and play in Monterey. And he was at the Savile Theatre and he said, I want to really give the English people a good show and to represent the fact that I'm leaving my guitar with them.
Also been involved in the writing the first thing they ever recorded at that Philips studio in Kensington. Once again.
Never got a penny. Oh no, you wait.
Don't go. Thank you. All right, is this the best convention so far? Yes. All right, now you can't go that way, you know this. You cannot go out that way. You have to go back that way, okay? All the people in the hotel, Adelphi Hotel, come back in the main entrance.
Richard Self cut short his holiday amid increasing criticism of the prison service. He refused to comment on this afternoon's talks or on whether he would resign. 2 men died today when their light aeroplane crashed near an airfield in Salford. They'd taken off from Barking Airfield 2 hours before it opened without informing air traffic control or getting permission. It's not yet known what caused the crash. And Norfolk Police made another appeal on Home Beach today for information about the missing school children, Mark and Jodie Lockton. Yet to hear that anyone who saw the children or their parents. The government said today a new report showing severe underachievement among primary schooling has indicated its decision to publish performance status. It found that the average 11-year-old was 2 years behind schedule in English and maths. Teaching unions branded it unduly pessimistic. Our political correspondent Tom Bradley reports.
This report by the Social Market Foundation does show that large numbers of 11-year-olds